Morning tea is only 15 minutes away, so you can keep that conversation going. But we will complete our first panel with Associate Professor Joanna Elfving Hwang from the UWA School of Social Sciences, one of my colleagues, who's going to talk to us about positive ageing and beauty work in South Korea. So we're taking a little journey now to another place and looking at a very interesting question. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got like really short time, and I'm one of those rambly people. So I am somebody who works on cosmetic surgery, and I work on popular culture. So what am I doing here talking about aging beautifully? I've worked on various aspects of beauty cultures in South Korea. You may be aware of the cosmetic surgery news articles that regularly come out. And as I was doing a bigger project on sort of body cultures and beauty cultures in Korea, there emerged very quickly a gap no one had been talking about aging bodies at all, despite the fact that we tend to age, all of us. And it was really interesting that there's a lot of research available on things like, you know, how aging bodies are very problematic because they are an economic threat in Korea, and I'm talking about Korean research here. And also there's a lot of anxiety about health infrastructure that is falling apart as the traditional values of looking after one's parents are sort of falling away. And then also the biopolitics of aging is a huge issue in Korea at the moment. So what's happening in Korea at the moment, that it's not only an aging society, it's actually moving very quickly towards hyper-aging society. There was a very heavy policy on restricting the numbers of children you could get health policies for in 1970s in order to encourage everyone to have just 2 children. And then as cost of living has kind of shot up in the past 5 years or so, well, 10, 15 years, people tend to invest money on their children rather than on their aging parents. And this is not just that, nobody cares. It's just that the people in the middle, the working age parents are very, very pressed in terms of just affordability. So cost of living is high and so forth. And then also, if you've ever met a Korean granny or granddad in Korea, they're pretty feisty lots who just really don't like being a burden. They are the generation that really pushed Korea out of economic poverty. Korea was really, really poor in the 50s and now is one of the richest countries and biggest economies in the world. So I think they sit in number 13 at the moment. So it is not a generation that really is too keen on feeling like a burden. But at the moment, the government's policy to really looking after the needs of the aging population still has been up until very, very recently looking to this idea that the family is responsible for looking after the needs of the aging population. At the same time, places like Seoul, where people have had their sort of social networks, is getting redeveloped constantly. So every time I go to Korea, I've just come back last week, you go to an area, my stomping grounds is Yeongdong-pogu, which is known as the elderly, I can't say seniors now, can I? Older people's groovy ground where, there's a lot of stuff there, if you want to go to a nightclub, there's an age limit. You can't go in unless they're over 65. And so there's a lot of stuff happening there. But when there's a high price on the land as well. So developers coming, they sort of flatten these smaller apartments, then they build 20-story apartments instead. And then the people who live there can't afford to live there anymore, so they have to then go somewhere else. So there are these kind of fracturing sort of social networks in cities as well as in rural communities, where things like elderly suicides, it's a real significant social issue. It's a really, really big issue. Retirement shock is a big issue, particularly for men, who then tend to become very much withdrawn, and this can happen at the age of 50 now. So lives are getting longer. Healthcare is amazing and cheap in Korea, but there is just sort of from the age of 50, nothing to do for a lot of people then who wish to stay in employment. So my research kind of stumbled across all of these research, these issues, while I was really looking at really fun stuff, which was, there we are. How do elderly women do beauty? So my kind of thing, I was really interested in, how in a society where beauty is like everything, how do you, as in an aging body, where beauty is kind of normative, youthful beauty is seen as normative, what does it mean to kind of do beauty if you're if you're 93, like this lady over here? And so I did some interviews with 20 participants. If you're interested in reading the findings, there they are. I can send you more details. But the key findings was that beauty, unlike in a lot of Western literature on this thing, wasn't really about like feeling anxious about the aging body as much as it was about, I work really hard and now I just want to enjoy myself. So I'm doing this for me and I'm really enjoying. So these ladies were using beauty very strategically. They were using beauty treatments, conversations about how to do beauty, I know so much about homemade beauty tips. Just ask me. The stuff you can do with spinach is incredible. And also they were very good at getting freebies, from shops, so that like really, these are really expensive products that, you can kind of do. And it was kind of like a everyday conversation. So I did a little bit of participant observation as well, just listening to these ladies talk. And it was really very much about kind of this sort of social interaction. And it was about sustaining positive appearance was really seen as a kind of sustaining positive selves in old age, but without the kind of super anxiety. Although some of the ladies also did cosmetic surgery, but they were just like, oh yeah, of course I did that, because I could afford it. So that was really great, and where this then led me. Okay, I'm gonna try this. So. What this led me to look at then is, because we also talk about popular culture, where do you get your beauty tips from? I was really interested in this, and who is your fave, like older actor, and what do you really enjoy watching? And then it kind of, I started really looking into the kind of cultural sphere. What is it? How are the aging bodies sort of represented in popular culture? Because that's one of the other areas I'm sort of, I guess, expert in. And because it's very important that the bodies, like these bodies are visible, right? So it's all good and nice to have these small groups doing their thing, but what's happening in the bigger sphere? And I discovered that this whole raft of movies, which are incredibly popular now in Korea. So what we have now in Korea is that this kind of popular culture movement where it's not just like this really naff positive representation of aging. It's really kind of sort of very nuanced, interesting films that are cinematographically beautifully shot, and they're really sometimes sad, but also kind of uplifting, but talking about really serious issues, but they're not depressing. This was one of the early ones. This is actually it got censored when it got released because it had open sex scenes of 75-year-old actors, having sex, and it was considered inappropriate. You can watch it online for free, though, if you're interested. But then there's also this new sort of genre called geronto rom-coms. I've named it geronto rom-coms. Get it? Yeah, okay, good. And sexuality also, and touch, and very close-ups of these aging bodies, and sort of very sensual shots, very much feature as part of these films. And whilst they are sort of framed in this sort of comedic genre quite often, they are at the same time quite often melodramatic. So for example, Late Blossom deals with things like falling in love for the first time when you're 75. It's the most beautiful film. Please watch it. Salut d'Amour, that's the Frenchization of the Korean title. It deals with Alzheimer's and falling in love over and over again because he keeps forgetting who she is, right? And Susan Han Kunyo is just like a fantasy movie where this granny suddenly finds herself magically in a body of a younger. This was really popular, and it got remade in China as well. And then Harmony is just this lovely granny who just swears yeah, she beats a shaman in a swearing competition. It's a very funny film again. And then My Love, Don't Cross That River. If you watch any movie this year, this has to be it. It was the highest selling or the box office hit in documentary in Korea when it was released in 2013. It was really, really popular. It's about these two elderly, lovely people who are both in, I think they're 97 and 98, and one of them, I'm going to give you a spoiler, he dies because that's in the synopsis anyway, and it's really about that journey of letting go, but it was very, very beautiful. But there's also things like Bacchus Lady, which deals with elderly prostitution, and which is an issue. And all these links, and I'm coming to the end, links with the kind of way in which Korea has, there was hardly anything in sort of mid-2000s in terms of, how are we going to really address this? And then what happened was Korea joined the global network of age-friendly cities and communities. There was a master plan, 2020 master plan for the age society, which was slightly before that in 2011. Oh, I've put that there twice, sorry. And then after that, what started happening is huge investment in trying to create these so-called silver towers, where a lot of cultural exchanges can happen, and things like film festivals. And I just want to kind of finish off with this film festival. And can I take 1 minute to show a very short clip? Is that okay? From the film festival and how they're advertising, because I think it really, really captures the sort of spirit of how they're going about doing this. It's all connected to this idea of which they added to the Daisy thing, which is the kind of post-retirement second life support, designing post-retirement aging. So it's almost like a career service. You go in there and you go, okay, I don't have any money. I don't have, because elderly poverty is huge. So 76% of single women in Korea are under poverty line. And then, it's all linked to that. So they're making these opportunities happen. So let me just finish with this. There's also beauty tips, but I don't have time to. And that's it. So I'll just leave it with that. And
the first panel was social science and humanities, but I knew it would be good to end with the humanities. So thank you very much, Joe. Any questions or comments or inspirations from Korea? They are inspiring. Beauty tips, please. Yes,
I'll talk to you after.
Can you share all those links with us? I'd love to go through all those links.
Absolutely.
That would be great.
And also, I think with the film festival, what's interesting about it is that they've now also included a section where whoever wants to get involved can actually start making their own films as well, and that's supported by the things like the Korean Film Archives and studios. There's pretty cool films coming out.
We just have time for 2 questions, 1 and 2.
Thanks a lot for your presentation. I too am a big fan of Korean culture. I have partners in Korea and I've been there many times. I translate a lot of movies into different languages, and one thing that I learned about from the Korean culture in many aspects is the art of living well, and this extends from every age of life. And this extends also to migrant workers here, whether irregular or irregular, this extends in Korea, and I think it's really something that we can learn. So thank you.
The art of living well.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I'm just interested to know what you think we can take from this and apply here to Perth or Western Australia.
Great question.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good question. There's a little bit 2 sides to the well-being, or as Koreans call it, well-being culture. It's, you have to have money to do it. So I think what the rural issue is still there. There's still people, there's real social issue of people committing suicide in rural areas, and that's mainly because of that connectivity issue as well. There is absolutely no transport, and people feel sort of isolated. So isolation is a huge issue. But I think in urban areas, what can we learn from this? Do you know, this, because this is a kind of side project, I think what we can learn is irreverence, because that's sort of And I like the idea of, Korean culture has got this concept of, you turn 60 and then you start from zero. So in the olden days, because people didn't live many people didn't live until they were 60. So if you turned 60, that was like you started counting your age from zero again. So I think it's kind of tapping into that sort of idea, but really the government is centrally enabling this to happen. So this one, the Silver Tower, or the Silver Cities, they are sort of being enabled by a very centrally orchestrated sort of a government policy and funding, that thing. And I think that kind of sort of policy level commitment from the government, or the Seoul city in particular, has really enabled a lot of these things happen. It doesn't mean that there wasn't anything happening before, but it was mostly in the hands of NGOs. And then it was very fragmented. So lots of voluntary work, in the hands of churches, Buddhist organizations and so forth. But I think it's really that lobbying power. And I think where it really started from for Korea was negative publicity overseas. So news reporting. So I don't know whether I should recommend negative publicity overseas. Because governments tend to be very, very funny about their nation brand.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.